All right. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Seeker's Quest. It's good to be here with you both, Veda and CC, and everyone else. Thank you for joining this morning. Today we are doing something special. We're doing 3 sessions right in a row, and the theme is disagreements, no disrespect. So we're going to talk about conflict, some of the causes of conflict, some healthy ways to deal with conflict, and then we're going to talk about forgiveness. So it's going to be kind of a sequential thing, and we'll air all of these episodes on our normal Tuesday, Thursday schedule. But today we're just going to record them all, so you can stay for them all, or you can drop off after this one, whatever works for you. But CC is going to Singapore, so we have to record a little bit early. So we're trying it out today. So how are you guys? Veda, CC?
I'm doing well.
Yeah, I'm doing. Yes. Yes. So I am doing well, but my gadgets are not doing well. And so that's why I'm not doing well.
Difficult when we're so connected to technology.
Yeah, I'm just trying to figure a few things out. But yes, I'm also looking forward to having this discussion. It's a new format. I feel that we may be able to go deeper into the discussion. So
yeah,
look forward to it.
Be fun. Me too. Are you in Mumbai right now, Prabhu?
Yeah, I'm in Mumbai. Today is my last day in Mumbai. Tomorrow I'll be leaving.
Okay, Singapore. And you're going to Singapore for preaching?
Yeah. For about a week,
great.
I'll be there.
That's great. Great. And how are you, Veda?
I'm well. Just programs, late nights, and it's a little bit of a drag when you have late night programs, but I can't keep up like CC doing late night programs and just keep going. I take a break from late night programs.
CC's like nonstop. I remember when he was in Pittsburgh, we had a program at my house, and he had to leave early. When I say early, at like 9:00 p.m. for another program. It's like, holy cow, it's already past my bedtime. So I don't know how you do it. An empowered being, CC.
It's making the most out for the Energizer Bunny, you know? Keep going.
Yeah. No, I'm not exactly empowered. I would say, okay, maybe I'm empowered. I'm empowered by my own passion. I hope one day that passion will become compassion. But yes, it's like, unless you keep yourself busy, your mind will keep you busy, and that won't be very productive. So,
That's fair. Can't argue with that. All right. Well, should we get into our content today? I think this first session we're going to talk about causes of conflict.
He's missing his tablet.
Okay.
Yeah. So
your tablet's connected, right, CC?
Yeah, it's just getting disconnected. I'm trying to figure out what's happening.
Okay. Yeah, I like this topic of conflict, because growing up in my family, we always tried to avoid conflict at all cost. So nobody expressed their feelings or emotions. Everybody kind of like stuffed them down, and then later they'd come out in like unhealthy ways, like maybe passive aggressive ways, or like things that are not so healthy for relationships. So even learning that it's okay to have different feelings than other people that you're close to was like an aha moment for me. It was just like, this was like 10 years ago when I started my therapy journey. It's like, oh, it's okay to have different opinions or think differently. And then getting in touch with what those actually were, and then learning how to express them in healthy ways was like a whole journey in and of itself. So this is a good topic, and it's actually liberating, I think, to learn that you can disagree with people that you're close to, or people that you're not close to, but that it's okay. It's like another level of finding yourself, I feel like. What do you think, Veda?
I love it. I think, whenever I think of conflict, I always think how there's internal conflict that spills over to the external conflict, But living in a world, this is a world of conflict. So we're such distinct individuals, and our conditioning are so unique that it's hard to not have conflict unless you're like a real sage. So it's a good thing to have conflict, because then you get to grow from it. So conflicts are great.
What do you mean when you say our internal conflict spills over into our external conflict?
I think, we have an internal identity crisis. And from that, how we interact with the world, this conflict spills over.
Almost like a mirror of what's happening inside of us.
Yes. So
like if we don't feel loved or something, we project that onto maybe our partner, and their actions we perceive as unloving, even if maybe they're not intended to be, because we have that internal conflict within ourselves. We project that on them. Is that an example of what you're saying?
Yes.
Yeah.
I have noticed, at least in myself, when I have internal conflict, something is lacking. It has a tendency to spill over. It's just the nature of our existence, that this conflict is going to always be there. We just have to see what is it that we can extract from that internal conflict. What is it that we can learn? Why is it that we have that, so that we can hopefully use it as a stepping stone to overlook and not let that internal conflict spill over outside, or deal with our internal conflict through meditation or some spiritual method.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this is a very good point, what you're saying. In one sense, the UNESCO Charter, it also says that because war arises in the minds of people before it erupts in the world, so war has to be removed. To prevent war, we have to remove the conflict from inside the minds of people. So we could talk about this at an individual level. We could talk about also at a global level. So there's inner conflict. At one level, it is a reluctance, or even it could be reluctance. Reluctance means I accept, but I don't like to accept. That can go to resentment, which is outright negative feeling. It is reluctance to accept what is reality. And what is the reality that I'm talking about here, that we either resent or we are reluctant to accept? It is largely centered on our place and purpose in the world. Mm-hmm.
So you're saying that
purpose. Let me just complete this point. Yeah.
Sure.
So our place and purpose is that we think that ultimately that I am God. You may not say that, but I am, you could say, meant to be. I may not be right now, but I am meant to be. And if I am not, then in a conflict, the other person is becoming God. So basically, this fundamental notion that leads us to think that either my opinion has to be right, and if that opinion is not right, then I am wrong, and then that means somebody else is right, and that makes me feel insecure and unworthy. So extremely vulnerable and endangered, threatened. So we could trace this when you say internal, say conflicts, you can say the trajectory. Conflicts can eventually lead to wars. But before conflicts, there are unresolved differences of opinion. And these unresolved differences of opinion, they often arise from ineffective communication. That could be one, that, what are you really thinking? That could be one cause of it. And we'll trace these causes. Okay, what can we do how can we improve our communication? That would be one aspect. But they could also arise from unrealistic expectations. And this ineffective communication is more like a skill which we can learn. There are values involved in the skill itself. But the unrealistic expectations comes from the idea that there should be no differences of opinion. So the ideal world would be no differences of opinion. And then why is this world not the ideal world? So that internal notion that if there are differences of opinion, that means there's something really wrong. If my opinion is different from yours, then that either means that I am wrong, which I don't want to admit because that makes me feel insecure, or you are wrong. And if you are wrong, then that makes me feel that if I don't prove you are wrong, then again, that makes me insecure. So this idea that there should be no differences of opinion, this itself, if we can address this, so broadly, now we can focus on this theme, that the internal conception. That's why I said our place and purpose. Who are we and what are we meant to do? If we look at our place and purpose and realign that understanding with reality, substantially the differences that are there, that could be resolved. Anyway, I've spoken a lot. Please, you can reflect now.
Okay, for this one that you drew, the place and purpose in the world, is this one of your pendulums where you have I am God on the left and other person is God on the right?
Well, I don't know whether it's a pendulum, because the middle point is not both of us are God.
That's what I was wondering. I was going to ask you what the middle point was.
It's not exactly a pendulum. I would just say.
But I think there is a pendulum, because in the pendulum it is, we are God, but qualitatively same and quantitatively different. So there is a pendulum, in my opinion.
So we could put it that we are all parts of God. We'll come to that. When we're parts of God means that we all have partially right understanding. The God, the ultimate reality, has the characteristic of omniscience. There's infinite cognitive capacity. There is therefore complete grasp of reality. But we are finite beings. So therefore we have a finite grasp of reality. So is
it almost like, instead of saying like I'm right or you're right, is it like saying we could both be right or have understandings that are based on reality, even though our perceptions may be different?
So yeah, it could be various possibilities. It's almost like it's not that I am wrong or you are wrong. That could be true, but what does it imply? That is what it is more important. For example, say if right now I say something like maybe the capital of a particular state in America is so and so. And then you say, no, actually, that's not the capital. Okay, I didn't know. It's not something which I'm invested in much. So just correct me for a fact, it doesn't matter. But if there's something which is much closer to me, and it's a opinion, it's an idea, it's a notion that shapes my very identity and worldview, then that will affect me much more. And that is why generally people fight over things which are very close to their heart. It could be some cause that is close to them. It could be their religion. Now, of course, politics can become people's religion. Money making can become their religion. Religion in the sense that which they consider extremely important, the most important. So what it implies will depend on, you could say, how important it is. So something which is a casual interest for me, and even if you prove that I'm wrong in that, it really doesn't matter to me. It's
this is okay to it's kind of like the saying, like the pick your battles thing, like with your spouse, and it's like, I'm gonna leave that alone, but I'm gonna hone in on this one a little bit more. Recognizing that some things are really important to you and some are just not so much.
So if it's a major part of my identity or worldview, then it's almost as if I admit that I'm wrong, then it's like the ground under me is pulled away. And that is very disorienting. So I have nowhere to stand on. So that's where the differences in opinion, they become very consequential if the issues at stake are very high. So do I need to be right about everything? Well, not necessarily. So it's like if we consider this is reality and I'm approaching reality from here and you are approaching reality from here. So what you are perceiving is real, what I am perceiving is real. But it's not exactly the same. In fact, it may be significantly different. So we could say that my understanding is correct, your understanding is correct, but both are incomplete.
Yeah, you talked about this a little bit before.
The man and the elephant, I think.
Yeah, the elephant example.
Yes.
Yeah, so if you're like a little bug on an elephant, like on the back leg of an elephant, you're going to perceive that elephant to be its leg, versus if you're on its trunk, you're going to perceive that elephant to be its trunk. And then you may be fighting with your friend about what an elephant is, but really you're both correct. You're just representing partial truths. So that's what this is. And that would be like the ideal scenario, right? To get to the place in a conflict where you can both recognize and understand each other's perspectives while still potentially staying grounded in your own. And in that way, there's like some kind of harmony.
Agreed. Yeah. That's what we look for. So now just going back to this point. So broadly, the way I look at this is that there is perception. My perceptions may be wrong, or my communication may be wrong. So when two people have a conflict, if I put two people over here, so that conflict may be about each other, the conflict may be about some object. Let's put some object over here in between. So the conflict could arise in our perceptions. How am I perceiving things? Now the object could be also be the other person. I may think I'm being responsible and committed to a relationship, but the other person may have a different conception of what commitment or responsibility means in a relationship. And there could also be lack of communication. So the problem could be in perception, the problem could be in communications, but even below that, rather, if you put it this way, hope this circle gets auto-completed or it gets extended. Forget it. Let me just keep it like this. So I have a certain set of expectations. So I would say even our perceptions and our communications, they are grounded in our expectations. So if my fundamental expectation itself is off, then say, for example, if I'm in a hospital and if I expect the food in the hospital to be like the food in a 5-star hotel, if I expect hotel kind of food over there, then it's not a matter of perception. Actually, the food is good, but you're just thinking it's not good. You just eat it a little bit more, it'll taste great. No, it's just the expectation is off. So I would say that conflicts need to be addressed at these three levels. And in fact, the 3 sessions which we are going to discuss, that I was thinking of taking it in this way. We address our fundamental expectations of what relationships are meant for, what life in the world is meant for, what we are meant to do in all this. And then from there, we can move toward perceptions of specific things. Okay, what's going on over here? And then we can move towards communication. Something like that.
Yeah, that's a lot. So you're saying that, tracing this back to the causes of conflict are, one, due to difference in perceptions. So like an example, like in a relationship, it's like if, could that be, okay, which one? Okay, actually, I'm going to further summarize and then I'll give you that example. Perceptions, difference, and then another is communication. So something maybe wasn't communicated clearly or something wasn't understood by both parties in the same way because of their lack of discussing their individual perceptions or lack of skillful discussion of their individual perceptions. And then the third one is difference in expectations. So that one's like, I expect, this isn't true, but I expect my husband to cook dinner every night and he doesn't. And then I take that to mean that he's being neglectful or something like that.
I was thinking how, we have put this perception and communication, but it almost makes me feel like there's 2 perceptions, 2 people involved. There's 2 perceptions, and the communication is supposed to be the glue that holds us together. But each one is perceiving what is being communicated on a very personal level. So you can say something, but I'll take it in a different way based on how I perceive. So that communication, even though it's supposed to bring us together, but because of our expectation within that communication, then we see no matter how well you communicate, there are still differences and misunderstanding. Because no matter what you say, I will psychoanalyze you and take what I think you said, even though you might have said something. So this diagram I like more. I don't know if I'm making sense, Sissy.
I'm tempted to psychoanalyze you, and I think you are trying to show us how clever you are.
Oh no, no, no.
I thought that was pretty clever, but I want to hear the psycho.
No, I don't.
psycho.
I always see myself. You can say, and like my teachers used to say something, and I would convince myself that he's wrong. And I am right. So that tendency in ourselves, it filters out into all communications. So at some point, we have to really hear, really hear what the other person is saying. And that I feel really requires some spiritual tools, like humility, some compassion, But but in principle, no matter what I'm told, I believe what I do. I believe what I want to believe. And therefore the spiritual aspect is a real deal in order to make sure there is no misunderstanding, misconception, expectation.
That's true. So
I like it.
Go ahead.
I was just saying, I like how he tied all of three of them together: the perception, the expectations, and the communication. Because really it could, and it likely does in a conflict, all three of those factors play in. Different perceptions, different set of expectations, and then maybe some level of flawed communication or lack thereof. And that's like, depending on how much all three of those variables are included in the recipe, it's dependent on like how big the explosion is.
You could say these three are in one sense progressive. It's what I seek is what I bring in. Perceptions is what I see. And then communications is what I say.
What you say. Oh yeah. So they do all kind of play on each other like that.
So what I seek, what I see, and what I say. Each of these can lead to a conflict. So if I come to a workplace and what I seek is maybe a very rapid career growth with a rapid increment in my pay, and maybe that particular field which I'm working in, it is a field which grows gradually. Maybe the particular place where I'm working, that place focuses not so much on such rapid growth as cultivating maybe a sense of building a foundation and training people, connecting with people, whatever. So if I have an expectation that I'll make a lot of money in this particular job, and that particular career is not shaped that way, that itself is going to cause conflict. Then perceptions is what I see over there. So I would say in terms of expectations, we could have incompatibility. Incompatible as a problem. Then perceptions, say I see that I'm working at this place and there's this colleague who is my equal, who's my peer, who's also working at the place. And that person gets a promotion, that person gets a raise, and I don't. And I start thinking, hey, this is favoritism. Maybe it's related to the boss, or maybe that's nepotism. Or maybe I think this is racism. Whatever. There's a particular perception I get. So this perception is often incomplete. That our expectations, even if our expectations are compatible, but still we might pursue things in an incomplete way. Maybe that person had done something which I don't know. Maybe that person has a specific skill set that is better suited for that race than what I have. I don't know that. but they're perceptions. And then, often I put our communication can be ineffective. It can be ineffective in many different ways. It can be, we'll discuss this a little later, it can be insensible in the sense that we may be irrational, we may be too emotional, or it can be insensitive. So each of these can lead to conflicts.
Could you say for the expectations, I was thinking of how our conditioning plays into this. Like, I know when my husband and I first got together, like, because my dad wasn't very reliable growing up, I kind of had like abandonment issues. So like if he was gone and didn't text me when he was coming back or where he was going, I would start feeling like anxiety because he left and didn't tell me. So that took like both of us working on it together for me to say, oh, can you be a little bit more reliable? And so him trying to be more reliable, and then me trying to kind of work with this feeling of abandonment, even though, I know it's not true. It's like based off my past conditioning, but it's coming out now to kind of change my perception. Otherwise, if I would have been stuck in that, my perception would be every time he leaves the house, I'm being abandoned. So it's like, I'm just thinking how your conditioning plays into this, because sometimes it's like whatever your expectation is of life, like even if you're like a half glass is half empty kind of person, then your perception is always going to be glass is half empty. And then your communication is going to be off of that too. So it's interesting how they also, expectations is really kind of huge because it's kind of like the start of it all.
I could say that. Yeah, please go ahead.
I was just thinking how you're making it very personal, your own issues, and being very vulnerable. And I think it's very nice. But when I think of such things as you were sharing, I see abandonment is not a personal issue, but it's really, abandonment is universal. Like everyone has different levels of abandonment, because the more we are disconnected from ourselves, we are going to feel abandoned. I'm not trying to get philosophical here. I'm just like,
I'm into it. I'm into this, Veda. I want to hear this synopsis. I like it.
The realistic aspect of this issue is abandonment. It's really a disconnection from ourselves and our relationship with the divine. And so we feel abandoned. And of course, contributing to the relationship, it can magnify those experiences of abandonment, can be magnified being materially also abandoned. But fundamentally, it's really deep within ourselves that we are disconnected from our divine self and our relationship with the divine. So obviously you're going to feel abandoned. And so therefore, I think we shouldn't just think that because I had, issues abandoned as a child, or, this or that, that is the only cause. That is a contributing cause for sure. But there's a deeper cause, which is the spiritual cause, the spiritual relationship that is being missing, that we have literally forgot our true spiritual identity, and therefore we are abandoned.
Yeah. Even while you're talking, I'm thinking like, actually, to be honest with you, if I'm being completely honest, nobody has abandoned me more than I've abandoned myself.
Yes.
I just said that, like, I'm like, oh yeah, my dad. I'm like, actually, you know what? If I'm being honest, I've pretty much abandoned myself on every plane possible, like by minimizing my feelings, my thoughts, my desires, my relation, by not having a strong relationship with the divine.
You should copyright this quote, or otherwise I'll plagiarize it.
Take it away. I don't need it. No one has
So-
abandoned us as much as we have abandoned ourselves.
I don't want to go off topic, but like, anytime I hear the word plagiarize, and I think to myself, what is not plagiarized in this world apart from the realizations of the sages,
True.
Yeah, there's Ralph Waldo Emerson. He said, one of the greatest disappointments and delights of my life has been that all my best thoughts have been stolen by the ancients. So it's a nice way of looking at it. But still. So I would say that, coming back to your point, Veda, here, that both of these, that if we have been abandoned by others, that causes fear. And if we have abandoned ourselves, that also causes fear. It's not one or two, and we need a two-pronged approach. Certainly, that we having abandoned ourselves is more foundational, it's more fundamental. So this often receives far lesser attention, and this does require much more attention, effort, work. But it's also that if I understand myself better, if I accept myself better, then I will also seek relationships which are more compatible, more harmonious. And I'll also be able to, and so the chances of being abandoned become lesser, relatively speaking. And also that even if I am abandoned, I don't feel that insecure, because we all have our sense of identity. And our sense of identity, where does it come from? It can come from who we are, or it can come from who we are with. Now, is who we are with, we could say this is more of our social identity. So that could be in terms of I'm single, married, I am a part of the elite group of people in the city, or whatever. The social identity is also an important part of who we are. But when that becomes too important, then there's a lot of neglect of who we are. So just to belong to a particular group, just to be connected or accepted by another person, I may end up losing who I am. So who we are with should not take us away from who we are. Or who we want to be with should not take us away from who we want to be. It shouldn't take us away from who we are. So I think this becomes a much more philosophical line of discussion. I would, if you have something to comment on, we can comment on that. I would like to go back to the expectation. What you have spoken is also related. That if I expect that the people have to be a particular way for me to connect with them, or I have to be a particular way to connect with people, and then that expectation has a domino effect eventually.
Also, I was just thinking what Veda said about the abandonment. It ties back to what he said at the very beginning, where external conflict is often a reflection of internal conflict. Like if you abandon yourself internally, then that's likely going to play out in your relationship. And also connecting with what you just said, if that's where you are internally, then that will likely play out externally, and that you'll socially be with a person or connected to a person that also abandons you, maybe physically or emotionally or whatever it be. So I just thought that was an interesting connection, the way the conversation kind of evolved like that. and it hit all those points you guys just said.
Yeah, true. So, going on with the expectations point, I have written a book on reincarnation. Almost every time when I talk about reincarnation, especially in the Western world, one of the key questions comes up is that, do we all have soulmates? That is there some perfect person out there for us? Now, this is at one level, you could say it's the aspiration of the heart. But what I often tell is, it's much more important that we focus on the soul first and then the mate later. Sometimes when we talk about a soulmate, we focus so much on the mate that we forget the soul. And that is where the problems come up. So, seek ye what in the Bible, and he says, see, what profiteth you if you get the kingdom? Get a big kingdom, but you lose your own soul. So similarly, we could say, what profiteth the person? You might get a wonderful mate, but if you lose your soul in that purpose, then that's not very healthy. So the expectation that our expectation that there should be something, some relationship, some situation, some profession that will be perfectly compatible for me. That expectation of perfect compatibility is itself. Perfect compatibility could be with various things. As I said, it could be a job, it could be the environment, it could be that itself sets us up for conflict. So now, does that mean that everything has to be intolerably incompatible? No, we don't have to go to the other extreme. But if you just understand that, yeah, there will be even the most compatible person is not going to be identical. There'll be differences. Even the most compatible situation is not going to be involving no discordant or no unpleasant, unlikable situations. So if we moderate that expectation, then what we will find is that at a foundational level itself, the conflicts will decrease. So we moderate our expectation, then the result of that is there is a greater acceptance. Not necessarily acceptance of total incompatibility, but greater acceptance that, that of the impossibility, of the illusoriness of a perfect incompatibility. I will never find, say, a group, if I want to do a project, if I wait for the time when everything is perfect, every member of the team is perfect, every individual is perfect, every market situation is perfect, it's never going to happen. So that can decrease the conflicts considerably. So when the Gita says that this world is a place of distress, this does not necessarily mean that we all have to be constantly in pain because of some terrible disease or some heartbreak or something like that. It just means that the world is a place of distress means distress will always be a part of our life experience. And once we accept that, now then we can see, okay, where is this distress being increased by my actions or the other person's actions, or where the distress is just because of who I am and who that person is. So we can work on that afterwards. That foundational expectation, if we moderate, then we can move forward to eventually deal with subsequent situations. So the place of distress is stop seeking utopia. Utopia, it could be in relationships, it could be in job, it could be in health, it could be in social environment. It could be in the environment itself. Nowadays, there is a lot of concern about environment, and it's valid. Our actions have affected the environment quite a bit wrongly. But that does not mean that if there had been no human action, even then the environment wouldn't have been a paradise. Life is tough. The world is a difficult place. Nature can sometimes be devastating. So stop seeking utopia. That moderating of expectations itself can lead to a substantial decrease in conflicts.
So you're saying that conflict is not just caused from having a difference in expectations, but by having maybe too high or too idealistic expectations.
Yeah,
and
that's beautiful. That's well
therefore
articulated. I had not thought of it that way. Good.
Therefore nothing can really measure up. And you'll never really be satisfied. You kind of set yourself up there. I will say, though, that sometimes finding the line between and I find myself questioning this myself too, okay, am I asking too much or am I giving too much? Because it's easy to or sometimes I have really high expectations of myself, but not high enough expectations of other people. So sometimes it's hard to really even figure out what's too high or what's appropriate level of expectations, I guess.
Yeah. One thing that you say, Cece, is stop seeking utopia. I don't know if you would be willing to explore that we should not stop seeking utopia, but we should stop seeking utopia in this material world. Because I think that utopia, that everything is permanent, there is a place in the spiritual world. The reason we seek utopia is because it exists somewhere, right? What do you think about that idea?
I reluctantly agree with it. Reluctantly means that two parts. Of course, now every deep aspiration, deep heartfelt aspiration of the heart does have some fulfillment somewhere. Like you can say, I talk about a soulmate. Ultimately, for every soul, the mate is God. We are all parts of God, and that is the ultimate fulfilling relationship. Mm-hmm. But then in that case, you also have to, we often have to revisit and revise our conception of the soulmate. Hmm? So similarly, when we say the kingdom of God, the spiritual world is utopia, so is the spiritual world utopia? Well, definitely it is, but it requires us to also revisit and revise our conception of utopia. If somebody thinks that utopia means that's a place where everything goes the way I want it to, everything works according to my desires, well, that's not going to happen in the spiritual world. Rather, my desires become aligned with a higher reality. So that is utopia. So I think if that conception is changed, then definitely it's the spiritual world is utopia. So this moderating our expectations happens to some extent by our study of spiritual wisdom, like given in the Bhagavad-gita and the broader yoga tradition. So when that happens, then it's a significant amount of conflicts, not entirely, significant amount of conflicts can decrease. So do you want to add anything? Either of you, or should I try to summarize?
I was just thinking when I wake up in the morning for my morning sadhana, for chanting and reading, sometimes it's like such a relief because it feels like the only thing that like really makes sense. And it's like if I didn't have that time every morning to even kind of like recalibrate myself and remind myself why I'm here and what I'm doing and that like this level of perfection does exist, the rest of the day would be just like hitting my head against a wall. That's how I feel. Because the reality is that like our everyday life is not like that, is not utopia, but it's nice to know that something is. And that's what keeps you going through the rest of it.
I just got Gauranga Prabhu, a very elevated soul, was just visiting, and he said something very interesting. He just reminded me of what he said, because how to experience utopia in this world, He said, you just manage your time from 9 p.m. to 9 a.m. If you manage 9 p.m. to 9 a.m., then 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. will be perfect. That is how you experience utopia in this world. And I was thinking, how beautiful is that?
It's so true.
Well said.
So go ahead and summarize.
Yeah. So it's a 9 p.m. to 9 a.m. would broadly mean we take adequate rest, we take care of our body, and then we take care of our soul with our spiritual practices in the morning. Nice way of putting it. So
I haven't had someone tell me that, so it hit me hard when he shared it yesterday.
Sometimes the truths that hit us the hardest are the truths that we already know to be truths, but they were never articulated that way to us, or they were never even articulated at all to us.
Yes.
That's how I feel when I listen to you, CC. I feel like, oh, that's it.
Are you saying that I keep hitting you?
Yeah, you keep hitting me with these truths that I feel like inside I've kind of known, but you really like articulate it and make it clear for me.
Is this a common word in the West? I saw it in some articles. Truth bombs.
Truth bombs. I'd say it's relatively common. It's definitely not uncommon.
Okay. The idea that something just explodes inside our consciousness. Now, the explosion has a somewhat negative connotation, but you could say it explodes and dissipates and destroys our preconceptions and misconceptions and by illusions. So
yeah, sure.
Summarize. So we started by talking about how outer conflicts, broadly we're talking about in relationships, how we can disagree without being disagreeable, without being disrespectful. So we discussed about inner conflicts. They arise from inner conflicts, and that led to broadly discussed these conflicts can come from three causes. It is expectations, that is what I seek. Then there is perceptions, which is what I see, we haven't discussed till now. And then there is communication, which is what I say and how I say it. And within that, we discussed about, today our focus was more on expectations. And within those expectations, we talked about how there could be different expectations that different people have in a particular situation. And that can lead to a mismatch, or there can be just unrealistic, too high expectations. So you could say even the different expectations are like a mismatch in expectation levels, and that leads to incompatibility. When you feel something is incompatible, and you start thinking, I need to change this, I need to fix this. So the idea that this inner conflict ultimately is that either I am God or you are. If my opinion is not right, then you are God. So these conflicts escalate, especially when we are heavily invested in something. So at one level, if we have spiritual wisdom and spiritual practices, then they can moderate our expectations. And while moderating our expectations is not the only way, we don't want to completely give up our hopes for a better world and our hope for a better self, better relationships. But we at least don't seek utopia here. And that helps us to create a realistic foundation from which we can deal with conflicts subsequently with a greater sense of stability and maturity. Thank you very much. Anything you want to add in concluding? Anything I left out?
I like the last word you said, reality expectation.
Sorry, reality expectation. Okay, yeah.
You just said that.
Right.
It was nice.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all very much.